During a family dinner, my father-in-law took my plate and said, "Women eat after men." I froze. My husband just whispered, "It's tradition." I smiled, quietly. The next day, I sent out dinner invitations. When they arrived, they didn't know what was coming. But they were about to learn exactly how I felt. It was a quiet Sunday evening in Charleston, South Carolina. The late summer breeze slipped lazily through the open windows, carrying the scent of rosemary chicken and baked sweet potatoes through our modest home. I had spent the better part of the day preparing dinner, not out of obligation, but because I loved the art of it. The simmering, the seasoning, the satisfaction of creating warmth from scratch. My husband, Daniel, had invited his family over, a casual meal, he'd said, nothing fancy. Just his parents, his older brother, and his brother's wife. I had been married to Daniel for nearly 3 years. He was kind, soft-spoken, with a steady way of doing things. I wouldn't call our marriage perfect, but I had always felt safe in it, until recently. Lately, there had been moments, flickers really, where he seemed different. Especially around his family. A slight change in his tone, a stiffer posture, a quiet compliance that didn't quite sit right. His father, Henry Whitaker, was a stern old man, the sort who walked into a room and expected it to bow. He had that old Southern kind of pride, the kind that wore tradition like armor and used it like a sword. His wife, Eleanor, rarely spoke unless spoken to, and when she did, her voice was barely above a whisper. Daniel's brother, Grant, was cut from the same cloth as Henry, loud, entitled, convinced of his own superiority. And then there was Grace, Grant's wife. Sweet, gentle Grace. She moved like she was afraid to take up too much space, always glancing at Grant before she spoke, like she needed permission to exist. I hadn't grown up like that. My parents, God rest them, taught me love with equality. Taught me that a marriage was a partnership, not a hierarchy. That a woman's place was wherever the hell she decided to stand. So when Daniel asked me to host, I said yes. I wanted to welcome them, show them a home filled with peace and joy, not just food. I cleaned every surface, lit tall beeswax candles, and folded linen napkins into little fans. The table looked like it belonged in a Southern Living magazine. I was proud. I was ready. They arrived just after 6. Daniel kissed my cheek as I opened the door. Henry grunted his hello. Eleanor nodded. Grant called me darlin' like I was a waitress, and Grace gave me a soft smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Dinner started like any other, idle chit-chat, comments about the weather, a few passive-aggressive remarks about Daniel's modern marriage. I smiled through them, kept pouring wine, kept offering bread. Then I brought out the plates. One by one, I set them down, serving the men first out of habit, saving mine for last. It wasn't until I returned from the kitchen with my own plate and placed it in front of my chair that it happened. Henry reached across the table, without so much as a glance, and took my plate. Just took it. He handed it to Grant, who didn't hesitate to dig in. "You eat after the men," Henry said flatly, as if I should have known better. The room went still, like someone had sucked the air out of it. I stared at the empty space where my plate had been, then looked at Daniel. He didn't meet my eyes. Instead, he just murmured, "It's tradition." Something in me cracked. It wasn't a yell. It wasn't a scene. Just a quiet snap in the core of who I was. I didn't cry. I didn't protest. I didn't demand my plate back. No, I just sat down, hands folded in my lap, and stared straight ahead. They ate. They laughed. Daniel chuckled at some story Grant told, while I sat silently in front of my empty setting, watching the food I had lovingly prepared disappear bite by bite. Eleanor didn't say a word. Grace looked at me, her lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't move either. And I made a decision. If tradition was the excuse, then tradition would be the weapon. I would not raise my voice. I would not storm out. I would plan. I would wait. I would show them, all of them, what it felt like to be seated at a table and treated like a ghost. Because this wasn't just about a plate. It was about dignity. And I was done pretending everything was fine. All week, I played the perfect wife. I kissed Daniel good morning, packed his lunch, folded his socks with care. I smiled through dinner and asked about his day. But every night, once he was asleep, I stared at the ceiling and replayed that moment, Henry's hand snatching my plate, Daniel's quiet betrayal, the silence that followed like a verdict. Tradition, he'd said. Well, let's see how they liked tradition turned on its head. That Friday, I sent a group text. Dinner this Sunday at our place again. My treat. Daniel glanced up from his phone, confused. Another dinner? I smiled, slow and sweet. I just want your family to feel appreciated. He looked at me a beat too long. Then nodded. All right, if you're sure. I was. God, I was. Sunday arrived like a reckoning. I woke early and poured myself into the kitchen. Prime rib, garlic butter shrimp, scalloped potatoes with aged cheddar, honey-glazed carrots, warm rosemary bread. My best dishes. Food that spoke of comfort, of power, of care. The kind of feast that makes a person feel spoiled. The house smelled like a dream by the time the doorbell rang. Same guests. Same smiles. Same tension underneath. They filed in and took their seats, the men first, just like before. I could feel the expectation buzzing in the room. Eleanor and Grace stood off to the side like shadows. I joined them. And then I moved. I walked around the table, calmly, methodically, and began collecting plates. First Grant's. Then Henry's. Then Daniel's. They looked up, startled. Henry grunted. What are you doing? I didn't answer. I just handed each plate to the women. To the ladies, I said, my voice cool as marble. Tonight, the men eat after the women. Silence detonated. Henry's face darkened instantly. Grant let out a scoff. Daniel blinked at me like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Babe, he started, voice low, what is this? I sat down next to Grace and cut into my steak. It's tradition, I said. Isn't that what you told me last week? Eleanor's hands trembled as she picked up her fork. Grace hesitated, glancing at Grant, who was still frozen in disbelief. Eat, I said gently, and to my surprise, Grace did. Henry shoved back from the table. We don't do things like this in our family. I swallowed, dabbed my mouth with a cloth napkin, and smiled. Exactly. Grant let out a sharp laugh, full of irritation. This is ridiculous. I tilted my head. Wasn't ridiculous last week when I was the one going hungry. Grace laughed, barely a sound, more a puff of air, and quickly masked it with a cough. But I saw it. I saw her eyes shift toward her husband with something dangerous flickering behind them. For the first time, she wasn't afraid. And Eleanor, quiet, pale Eleanor, slowly lifted her fork and took a bite. Her shoulders didn't shake. She didn't flinch. She ate like it was her right. Because it was. The men sat in stunned, fuming silence as we dined. When I finished my plate, I leaned back, locked eyes with Henry, and said, since the women cooked, the men can do the dishes. Grant scoffed, thinking I was joking. But I didn't move. I didn't stand. And when it became clear I wasn't going to, I watched the realization bloom on his face like a slap. Daniel hesitated, then looked at me, looked at his father, and finally, slowly, rose to his feet and began collecting the plates. The moment he did, I felt it. The shift. The balance, so long tilted, beginning to move. Later that night, after the house had emptied, Daniel and I stood in the kitchen, staring at the sink full of dirty pans. He wasn't touching them. Just swirling his drink in silence, his eyes stormy. Finally, he spoke. What the hell was that? Dinner, I said simply. He let out a bitter laugh. You humiliated my father. I crossed my arms. Did I? Or did I just show him what it felt like to be on the other side? You made everyone uncomfortable. Good. His jaw tensed. Why did you have to make it a whole thing? That was it. That was the match to my gasoline. I slammed my hand on the counter so hard the glassware rattled. Oh, I made it a thing? Your father took my food in my own home and said I didn't eat until the men were done, and you just sat there. Daniel flinched. I kept going. You let it happen. You defended him. You let your family treat me like a maid with a ring on her finger. He rubbed his temples. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. No, I whispered, stepping closer, I'm finally making it as big as it always was. The next morning, just as the sun bled through the blinds, my phone buzzed. Anna. Her name flashed across the screen like a whisper, like a question she hadn't asked yet. Anna, are you awake? Me, yeah, what's going on? Anna, can we talk? I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Daniel, and padded downstairs. My heart was already thudding. I called her, and she picked up before the first ring ended. Her voice was small. I wanted to say thank you. I blinked. For what? For standing up to them, she said, and I could hear the tremble beneath her words. For showing me I'm not crazy, for thinking this isn't normal. I sat down at the kitchen table, the wood still smelling faintly of garlic and rosemary from the night before. Anna, I said softly, how bad is it? There was a silence on the line. Then she exhaled. I don't even know anymore. Mark's never hit me or anything, but he talks to me like I'm a child. Like my thoughts are a threat. She paused. He tells me what to wear. What to cook. Who to see. If I ever speak up, he calls me hysterical. Emotional. Says I need to calm down or I'm embarrassing him. And his dad, her voice cracked, his dad always backs him up. Like I'm some wild horse they're both trying to break. I gripped my coffee mug so tight my knuckles went white. And last night, she continued, when you flipped it, when you took their plates. I saw his face. It wasn't shock. It was fury. Not because it was unfair. But because he wasn't in control. Her voice dropped to a whisper. For the first time, he wasn't the one calling the shots. And I don't think he knows how to handle that. I swallowed hard. What do you want to do, Anna? There was a long pause. Then, barely audible, she said, I don't know. You don't have to decide anything right now, I said. But you need to know, you're not imagining this. You're not overreacting. You deserve better. I could hear her breath hitch. A tear, maybe. Or relief. Or both. 2 days later, I was knee-deep in work emails when my phone rang again. Anna. This time, her voice wasn't small. It was shaking. Furious. Unfiltered. I can't do it anymore, she whispered. Anna? What happened? He found the pamphlets. My pulse spiked. What pamphlets? I went to see a lawyer. Just to talk. Just to see what my options were. But Mark must have gone through my purse. He found them last night. Oh God. What did he do? He screamed, she said. Told me I was humiliating him. That I was trying to ruin our family. He grabbed my phone. Told me I wasn't leaving him. Ever. My stomach dropped. Anna, did he hurt you? She was quiet. Then, so softly I almost missed it, not yet. That was enough. Anna, I said, steel in my voice, you need to leave. Now. I know, she whispered. But I don't know where to go. You come here. Pack a bag. Take your car. Get out before he comes home. She hesitated. What if? I don't care, I snapped, not out of anger but out of fear. You are not staying in that house one more night. Another breath. Okay. I ended the call and immediately began moving. I pulled blankets from the linen closet. Fluffed the guest pillows. Lit a lavender candle. Anything to make the space feel safe. Warm. Unafraid. Just as I finished setting the room, the front door opened. Daniel. He dropped his keys on the counter, glanced at me. Hey. Who was that? I hesitated. I had never lied to my husband before. But this wasn't his to control. Just Anna, I said lightly. Girl talk. His brow furrowed. Everything okay? I nodded. She just needed to vent. He watched me longer than necessary. Then finally nodded, slowly. All right. I turned away before he could read too much on my face. I knew something had changed between us. And I didn't know if we'd ever come back from it. 3 hours later, Anna arrived. Her hands were shaking as she pulled her suitcase inside. Her eyes were red and puffy, but there was something beneath them, something burning. Something alive. I pulled her into a hug. You're safe now. She clung to me like I was the only thing anchoring her. I don't know what I'm going to do, she whispered. We'll figure it out, I promised. And I meant it. Anna barely touched her dinner. She just picked at the edges of her plate, staring past the food, her mind 1,000 miles away. I didn't press. I didn't ask. I just sat beside her on the couch, the soft hum of the ceiling fan filling the silence between us. We were just about to head upstairs when her phone buzzed. She flinched. The screen lit up. Mark. Before she could react, I reached over and silenced it. My heart was already beating too fast. A moment later, Daniel's phone rang from the bedroom. We froze. And then came the knock. Not soft. Not polite. Demanding. Anna went pale, her hands clutching the hem of her sweatshirt like it could shield her. No, she whispered. No, no, no. I peeked through the blinds. Mark was standing in the driveway. And he wasn't alone. Henry was beside him, arms crossed, jaw locked, their silhouettes sharp under the porch light. Like executioners. I turned to Anna. You don't have to do anything. You owe them nothing. She shook her head. If I don't go out there, he won't stop. Another knock, harder this time. Then the doorbell. Daniel stepped into the room, phone still buzzing in his hand. He looked at Anna. Then me. His face twisted. You knew. I said nothing. He scoffed, running a hand down his face. You went behind my back. Because I knew you'd try to stop me. His eyes narrowed. Mark is my brother. I deserve to know. Your brother is terrifying his wife, I snapped. You really think I care about your feelings right now? Another knock. Louder. Anna, Mark's voice came through the door, smooth, low, practiced. Come outside. Let's talk. Anna backed away like the sound physically hurt her. Then came Henry's voice. You're embarrassing yourself, girl. And our family. I turned to Daniel. Are you going to let them do this? In our home? He looked torn, like a rope being pulled from both ends. Then he moved. To the door. Daniel, I warned. He opened it. Mark and Henry walked in like they owned the place. Anna flinched. Mark moved toward her, voice syrupy. You're being crazy, babe. Come home. Let's talk like adults. But I saw his fingers twitch. His jaw clench. The way his eyes darted to Henry, waiting for approval. He wasn't here to talk. He was here to win. I'm not coming back, Anna said, her voice small but steady. Mark stopped. What? I'm not coming back with you. He blinked, like he couldn't process the words. Henry stepped forward, all wrath and authority. Tell her she's being ridiculous, he barked at Daniel. But Daniel didn't move. So Henry turned on me. You did this. I crossed my arms. Damn right I did. You're ruining this family. I laughed coldly. No, Henry. I'm just exposing what's already broken. He stepped closer, towering, his voice dropping to something dark and dangerous. You have no idea what you've started. And I had enough. I met his gaze, unflinching. I didn't start this. You did. The day you taught your sons that love means obedience. That control is the same as respect. That women should be grateful just to be allowed at the table. His jaw clenched. His fists curled. But before he could say a word, Anna stepped forward. I'm filing for divorce. The words dropped like thunder. Mark reeled. You don't mean that. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but her voice didn't waver. I do. Henry's eyes flared. No woman in this family gets divorced. Anna raised her chin. Then I guess I'm not part of this family anymore. The room fell into stunned silence. Then Henry turned to Daniel, desperate now. Get in the car. We're leaving. I won't let this woman poison you. My stomach dropped. He wasn't just trying to control Anna. He was trying to take Daniel with him. Daniel looked torn. For one agonizing moment, I saw it, the pull of loyalty, of legacy, of a son trying to be good in the eyes of a man who never saw him. And then, quietly, firmly, he spoke. I'm not going. Henry froze. Mark looked like he'd been slapped. You heard me, Daniel said, standing straighter. I'm not going. Don't be stupid, Henry snarled. You walk away now, you're done. No coming back. Daniel looked at me. And then he said, I'm staying with my wife. Henry's face twisted in fury. He stormed out. Mark followed, silent, his face a mixture of betrayal and rage. The door slammed behind them. Silence fell. Anna was crying, but for the first time, I didn't think it was out of fear. I turned to Daniel. You okay? He exhaled, long and ragged. I don't know. And I understood. He had lost something tonight. But maybe, just maybe, he'd found something too. The next few weeks moved like slow rain. Anna stayed with us for a while. We fell into a rhythm, quiet mornings with coffee on the porch, long silences filled with the kind of comfort only survivors understand. She started calling lawyers, setting up appointments, taking notes like a woman building a map out of the storm she'd lived in for years. One morning, she walked into the kitchen holding a new lease in her hands. I found a place, she whispered. I hugged her tight. Her body still trembled sometimes, but the light behind her eyes was returning. The day she moved out, I helped her carry boxes into a second-floor apartment that smelled like paint and possibility. There were no pictures on the walls yet, just clean white space and quiet freedom. I don't know what comes next, she said, standing in the doorway. You don't have to, I told her. You just have to take the next step. She smiled, small but real. And that was enough. A week later, I got a call from an unknown number. When I picked up, I heard a familiar voice, soft, worn, trembling. Hi, it's Carol. Henry's wife. The woman who had never raised her voice, never challenged a man, never picked up her fork before being told it was okay. I'm sorry to bother you, she said, but I wanted to say thank you. I didn't know what to say. She continued, her voice cracking. I left. I packed a bag and I went to my sister's place in Raleigh. I didn't tell Henry. I just walked out. I sat down, hand over my mouth, stunned. I didn't know I could, she whispered. Until you showed me. When I hung up, I cried. Not out of sadness, out of grief for the years she'd lost, and joy for the ones she still had left to live. Back home, Daniel was quieter than usual. There were days where I saw the weight on him, not just of his father's absence, but of everything he'd unlearned. The myth of manhood. The inheritance of silence. The ache of watching everything you thought was strength crumble into cruelty. Some nights he'd sit on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. Do you miss them? I asked once. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, I miss the version of them I used to believe in. He struggled. He stumbled. But he stayed. And that mattered more than anything. One evening, months later, he brought me a cup of tea and sat beside me on the porch. The cicadas were singing in the trees, and the air smelled like jasmine. I see it now, he said softly. I looked at him. See what? He didn't answer. But I knew. He saw the quiet cuts that came in smiles and tradition. He saw how I'd swallowed my pride to keep peace. How I'd planned revenge with dignity instead of rage. How I'd protected Anna not because I had to, but because someone had to. He saw me, fully, finally. And he stayed. That night, for the first time in months, I slept deeply. No tension in my shoulders. No fire in my chest. Just breath. Just peace. Anna started therapy. She got a job at a local bookstore, where she spent her days surrounded by stories of women who saved themselves. She called often, laughing more, crying less. I feel like I'm finally living, she said once. Carol never went back. She found a small apartment 2 towns over, started gardening, and even adopted a dog. When she called, her voice was lighter, less brittle. And me? I kept cooking. Kept lighting candles. Kept building a home, not from silence or submission, but from strength, from choice, from truth. One night, while chopping vegetables, Daniel came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. He kissed the back of my neck and whispered, "Thank you." I turned to him, smiling softly. For what? For not letting me become him. That's when I knew. This wasn't just my fight. It was ours. And we had one, not with war, not with screaming, but with clarity. With conviction. With the quiet, unshakable truth that no woman owes anyone her obedience just to keep the peace. We don't just sit at the table. We build it. And if they don't make room for us, we take our plate back. And we make damn sure they know it.